Okay, we're picking up in the crash course in Jewish history, and I want to go over what I call the 1-minute map to Jewish history. So what we're going to do in this session is get a big picture overview of the major eras in Jewish history and understand essentially the challenge the Jewish people are facing. And this will help give us context as we go through the course. So you always know where we are and what the overall threat or challenge or growth point is for us at that time. But this way you'll see a continuum and you'll get a sense of where we go from the very beginning and where we end up to today. And everything we're going from this point on is going to fit into our 1-minute map to Jewish history. So here goes. So Jewish history can be divided into 4 distinct phases. Phase number 1 is what I call the development of Jewish civilization. It's 4,300 years of time. Now, it really begins before Jews have emerged on the scene with Abraham, but it starts with creation, and it's going to go all the way until the development of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, which we covered in the crash course in Torah. We grow into a nation in the land of Egypt. Eventually we get into the land of Israel. We're going to be there for a long time. We're going to be exiled once by the Babylonians. We'll come back a second period of time for over 4 centuries. Then we'll be exiled a second time by the Romans, and we'll go into what's called the Roman exile. But it's a 4,300-year period of history, and essentially we've established what I call a Jewish civilization. The Jewish people within our own borders, functioning as a society amongst all the other different nations in the world. Then because of the Roman exile, we enter phase number 2, which is the Middle Ages. Now, the Jewish Middle Ages is a 1,000-year period of history. And here we're going to have 2 points of pressure operating against the Jewish people. On one hand, we're going to have religious persecution because of the rise of Christianity and then of Islam. And we're going to have economic hardships, as we'll see, as the feudal system is established and society collapses. And it's going to be a very challenging time for us to live amongst hostile people. So we're going to have 1,000 years of really persecution, 2 different types of forces operating against the Jewish people. Then history goes through another major turning point, and we enter phase 3, which is the Enlightenment, which presents now new challenges as the world changes politically and socially over a period of 400 years, really beginning with the Renaissance. Now the arrows go in the opposite direction, because as the doors have been opened to society for the Jews to participate in, and there's a new age of tolerance, now we're under the threat of assimilation, where the Jewish people are running away from their national identity, trying to show their loyalty to the nations they're living in. At least many of them are doing that. And now we have the threat of assimilation, where we might just collapse as a separate national entity and conform and assimilate into the nations that we're living amidst. Phase number 4 is the modern era and Israel, as Jews from around the world end up back in the borders of the land of Israel. The first time in 2,000 years, we are now once again a distinct nation within our own borders amongst the nations of the world. And we're still somewhat in this phase as we try to figure out exactly what is our identity within the land and what is our Jewish identity outside of Israel, and how the nations of the world themselves relate to the Jewish people being back in their land. So that's phase number 4. So that's the 1-minute map to Jewish history. The whole crash course you're going to go through now is going to be going through each one of these phases step by step. And by the end, my hope is that you'll have each one very clearly mapped out in your mind, so you'll be able to navigate further in your journey of understanding every stage of our history and what we've been through, which is quite remarkable. So let's do a little review of what we've got here. And this is our 1-minute map. Here goes. Jewish history can be divided into 4 distinct phases. Phase 1 is development of Jewish civilization. It's 4,300 years in total. It starts with creation. We'll see why that's important to go all the way back even before Abraham's on the scene. But essentially through this phase, we've established ourselves within our own borders, with our own Torah, our own constitution, our own society as a people amongst the nations of the world. That's going to take us all the way up to the Roman exile. Phase 2 is the Middle Ages. It's a 1,000-year period of history. And essentially there are 2 different forms of hardship on the Jewish people. There's going to be religious persecution, and there's going to be economic hardship. Phase 3 is the Enlightenment. It's a 400-year period, really beginning with the Renaissance. And now the challenge is we might just assimilate away into the nations that we live amidst, because a new notion of tolerance has been born, and we might collapse as a separate, distinct national entity. That's the challenge of the Enlightenment. And then phase 4, we see that we're never going to get full acceptance amongst any nation, and that's the modern era and the return to Israel to a certain extent, and that's the phase we're in as we try to figure out where we are. From this point on, anything you learn is going to fit within this 1-minute map of Jewish history. In fact, all of world history is going to fit within this map of Jewish history, because it takes us right from the very beginning of creation to present day. This is going to be our outline for Jewish history, and now we're going to go into phase number 1, which is the development of Jewish civilization.